So I'm going to model how we're going to ask questions in a few minutes. From your seat, you may ask questions by pushing and holding this button right here. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike Petrelli to lead this Q&A. He's going to ask a few questions of the panel himself, and then we'll ask you guys to ask your own questions. So with that.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Great to be back. So I want us to get as concrete as we can in this session when it comes to policy and practice. So let's start with the elementary school example that we've got, which is an amazing school. When you're thinking about, we heard a lot about high expectations about using data. How do you work with teachers in a very concrete way to make sure that they are aiming high enough? If this seems to be the big challenge, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about sort of these words of, believing that the kids can do it. And is it looking at student work? Is it looking at the standards and studying them? Is it looking at assessment results? Like, how do you get that across to teachers that says, this is really what we are trying to get these kids to achieve, and these kids, these group of second graders, third graders, and fourth graders, they really can get here? Mm-hmm. What does that look like?
Okay. Modeling and buddy. So I know Dr. Farrell, she's really good about having us go to each other's classroom. And like, for example, Brandon, he does math science for 5th grade, and then Denise, the literacy and social studies. So if I need an inquiry-based learning, which is our framework, but if that's something I really struggle as someone new to IB, someone new to Burton, then I need to get in Brandon's classroom. Okay, and I need to be observing him. So I would say that it's first going to start with the best practices for your students, and then in the PLC model, okay, you are going to have someone from the administration team to kind of set the framework. Also, our instructional facilitator, academic coach, Ms. Gragg, she's wonderful, and so she will get the nitty-gritty about these are the standards and all that. But if you want to know, if you really want to get to the babies, get to best practice, and so I'll be looking at fellow teachers.
Okay, great.
And
any more to add from a teacher perspective, how that has looked? Or?
And I think that a lot of it has to do with the challenging aspect and not doubting your students or thinking that, oh, they won't be able to do this or some can't do this. We talk about differentiating our lessons. When I'm thinking about my whole group, I also like to think of something called, what one of my professors called Saymation, where I can get everybody into the conversation without limiting my mathematics or limiting my science. I can, what Joe Bowler at Stanford called the low floor, high ceiling, where I can just ask a general question and get everybody to come in, like, why do you think that works that way? Or how could I move that? Or how could I build this? And then we can get into grander discussions. But the main thing is that believing them and then without doubting them, but also putting it into practice, like you said, by making sure that I have rich, complex tasks, things that they're working on, and I'm not trying to dumb down the things. I'm making sure that they have some struggle, that they are going to persevere, because it is going to be challenging. That's what each grade level you move up is going to get more and more challenging. So I'm not going to take away challenges. I'm going to try to prepare you so you can adapt to challenges.
And as we talked about in the first session, engaged. You have to have your students engaged, and this is where I talked about the importance of magnet programs. If you have this innovative program, which is wonderful, it deserves to be offered to all of our students, all of our families, because if you get them engaged, then they're going to work hard and they're going to work to meet those high expectations. Brandon is wonderful about like his hook or his launch or whatever you want to call it for the lesson. He makes it a real world learning experience, and those babies, it's where everyone can add something and then automatically they're already hooked, they're engaged, and they're ready to learn.
Yeah, what I'm really struggling with in this conversation is it feels like we keep talking about beliefs. And I worry that there's schools out there in North Carolina or all over the country where there are just educators that look at a group of kids, especially coming from poverty, and they don't believe. They don't believe that they can achieve at very high levels. And I understand if you can send in a new principal and they can recruit new teachers who share those, beliefs. But what do you do to change the beliefs of people that are already there? Is there anything that we know? We want to shake these people and say, no, these kids, these babies, as you say, really can do more than you think they can. I mean, is there anything that policymakers can do? What can we do for people that are, other than send in new principals to overhaul the school?
Yeah, I think that's the question we've been asking ourselves for like 20 years. So we've tried a million different things to see how do you change people's beliefs. And one of the ways is with the data. You let them see the data. But we've had people actually say to us, well, if high poverty kids score level 5, that doesn't mean they can actually do the math. The people will deny the data. It's just kind of amazing. But I think as they see examples of success, gradually they'll change. Or we can legislate it and mandate it, and we don't care if they believe it, they've got to do it anyway.
Right. Although, look, we've got a lot of experience in education reform of trying that strategy, the top-down mandate, and it often leads to huge pushback and resistance or just compliance mentality. I mean, it's, it hasn't gone that great. But in this case, is there a different experience happening?
Yeah, I think in this case, the key is that we're looking at it from a mindset, policy, and practice perspective. And so because the groundwork had already been happening, this legislation was able to really push the needle. Does that make sense? And so very few people, yes, there's no doubt there are mindset shift needs, right? But it's happening quickly when somebody's like, oh, but those kids did great when we gave them the interventions. And so to Janet, as well as our Burton Friends examples, the practice, to answer your question, Mike, really helps move that needle, right? When you see it, when you see the examples of the students, and when you really think deeply and strategically about what are the interventions. And we have the critical conversations of, it really is about changing our mindsets, right? And it's about this and this. So we're not hiding behind something, because saying a student's at potential versus at risk, many times say, oh, those at-risk kids. Well, is the student, it's really about their risk factors, right? And so how are we changing our mindset so we then are also shifting these other pieces? That's what we found in this example in particular. There's no doubt there are some people still out there who will say, really? Are you really? And we'll say yes, because this is what we're doing. But then over time, even in just a year, what we're finding is that things are slowly changing because they had that example. But it does take a lot of groundwork, and it takes time, and it takes strategic interventions on all of those initiatives. PD for beliefs and mindsets, a culture, right, of responsiveness and relationships, but also the clear strategic practices that work with children, and then the policies that really drive it home.
All right, great. Well, let's get you into the conversation. I know you've been working on some questions, so if you've got one for the panel or a particular panelist, let's hear it. Who wants to go first? I love it, by the way, that you all went to lunch and then you came back and mostly sat where you were sitting before. Is that right? That's great. Okay, yeah.
The end of grade tests that you use to compare the grades.
Yeah.
Grades. That's a standardized test written before the school year, correct? Is that how it's done?
Right, yeah.
So
I think so, yeah.
Like here in North Carolina, we've had a few.
Oh, sorry, yep, that's right. You got to press and hold the mic. Yep.
Yes.
That
Okay.
works.
So here in North Carolina, we have snowstorms out west. We've had hurricanes, 3 in the last
Yeah.
4 years, where there are some districts that are missing 4-5 weeks of school,
Right.
and it's written off.
Yeah.
So they don't get to go back and relearn that.
Yeah.
And then we have some schools out west that with the snowstorms, they can just, it's 1,025 hours.
Yeah.
And I asked a superintendent last year, I said, how you doing with the calendar? Oh, we're fine because we're going to get 1,026 hours this year, which is such a low standard.
Yeah.
But I guess the question
take
is, did you look at all these other factors versus just saying what were the end of grade tests and what were the grades, therefore, oh, it must be
Right.
grade inflation?
Right. I would have to dig into the study to remind myself all the different things that the researcher was able to control for. I think there's a bunch of stuff in the data set. I'm not sure if he could look at those instances but I would say, because it's statewide, it's over multiple years. I mean, a lot of that stuff you would think would probably wash out. I think the general, pattern is still going to be there, which is that, we can see these trends in terms of test scores. We can see the trends in terms of the GPAs. But it's totally fair. I mean, I get it that there, especially in recent years, there's been some really huge challenges.
And just to let you know, in North Carolina, we did, and Dr. Howard, our accountability director, could speak more to this, but we did analyze all of the North Carolina, our state assessments, and there was no statistics, and there were no variances in whatever they did in their statistical study for the districts who had, for example, any of the hurricanes or the snow.
And then one other thing real quick.
Okay, can we get-
That was my
I
question,
just-
but the group question.
Yeah. Okay, let's get in here. I'm just, we're just up against a deadline here.
Yeah, Matt Smith, Principal of the Year, Ben Pendarvis from Tri-County Early College, and Rick Van Sant. Kind of a general question predicated on the idea that students with potential ought to be taught really rigorous math courses at the level that they're ready for, presumes that there's a high-quality math teacher available in every classroom. And so I wondered if Fordham Institute had done any research or has any recommendations for best practices that might be useful for the General Assembly as they're considering how do we make sure that we establish systems and policies and practices statewide that grow our teacher pool for math candidates. How do we improve the quality of education preparation programs so that they are teaching math candidates with the same conceptually based, rigorous methodologies that are necessary for them to translate into the classroom? And how do we balance for equity issues when we have low socioeconomic counties that don't have teacher supplements to compete with urban counties that have a 25% teacher supplement? And lots of issues there.
Yeah.
All of this predicated on the idea that we need to have a high-quality math teacher in every classroom. Any thoughts on that?
No, good question. You know, we don't do a ton on the teacher issue. We kind of long ago helped start the National Council on Teacher Quality and kind of defer to them. But look, I'll just personally say, you know, I mean, the easy answer, you know, is that markets work and that if we have a teacher shortage, especially in math, we need to pay those math teachers more in order to compete with those other opportunities that people with those skills have. You know, clearly we are particularly challenged right now with such a tight labor market. Everywhere around the country, people are struggling with this question. But, you know, I think we've got to be willing to do that. You know, the other thing I would just say is what can we do to help raise the bar for all teachers? You know, we think about teacher quality as this static thing. And I think that comes from partly because so many of us have been exhausted by attempts to use professional development to improve teacher practice. But look, I think what we do know is that high quality curriculum, especially including a high quality math curriculum, can go a long way in terms of helping, you know, average teachers be really good teachers. And that, you know, that's got to be a part of the conversation as well. I'm not sure in North Carolina if curriculum has been on the radar screen as much as it has been in some other places. I understand Charlotte's just been implementing a new curriculum this year, but you know, to have an aligned curriculum that gives the teachers the tools to be much more effective is something that you can do immediately, and at least in that case, it doesn't cost really much more money to do a good curriculum than a bad curriculum, but it can make a big difference.
And for those BTs or beginning teachers, you know, your first through 3 years, mentor. Man, it makes all the difference in the world having a supportive mentor. And you usually just find someone in the building, but I know in Durham, they have done a great job building up that mentor program, making sure that you have multiple ones at a school, went to training, went to coaching, and that was really good because that's where you find the burnout, those first 3 years.
Yeah, I wish we had more time, but we don't. So please join me in thanking our great panel for their fantastic work, the educators, the policymakers.